Hi students, this is Subramanian E, belongs to IT department, working for Amet University, Chennai. Today we are going to discuss about object oriented programming and the subtopic under that is inheritance. Today we are going to see about inheritance. So this is what we are going to discuss today. The session agenda is need for inheritance, introduction, visibility mode, accessibility of base class member, and then different forms of inheritance. This is what we are going to discuss today. So the main topic is need for inheritance. What is the purpose or what is the use of this inheritance in object oriented programming? The primary use is the reusability of code. That is what the main thing. And then the second one is it increases the reliability. So reliability in the sense we are going to reuse the code whatever we are using in the previous one. So it increases the reliability. And the last one is it going to inherit all the features. Whatever we want, we can inherit the features from the previous one. So as I told you, we are going to inherit the previous one. The previous one, what we can name that as a technical thing. The technical name for that is the previous one can be called that as the base class, and the whatever thing we are going to derive or we are going to inherit is called as the derived class. So two things we are going to discuss as the technical part in C++ because the Java has a different name. So in C++ we are going to call the base class and the derived class. So this is the example father, and the father has 2 sons and 1 daughter. So this is simple example for inheritance, while the father can be called as the base class and the 2 sons and daughter can called as a derived class. Why we call the base class and derived class means the base class consists of all the features and the derived class consists of some of the features of the base class in addition to that particular class having some extra features. That is what the derived class. Then the primary thing in inheritance is the visibility mode. In other words, we can call that as access modifiers or access specifiers. So what is meant by this access specifier? In the sense, access specifiers, we can split the entire word into 2 categories. One is access and one is specifier. So we are going to provide some access to the classes. So we already discussed that base class and derived class. There are 2 classes. So one class going to use the features of the other class. So while accessing, we are going to provide some features or some protection. That protection we can call that as a access specifiers. The access specifiers, there are 3 things or 3 types in access specifiers in C++. What are the 3 types means? One is public and another one is private and another one is protected. So these are the 3 access specifiers available under C++. So what is meant by the private inheritance and public inheritance and protected inheritance? That is what we are going to discuss. So first one is private inheritance. So private, as the name itself reveals that it is a private. Private in the sense the members in the sense variables and the functions, whatever we declared, defined under base class can be the private to the other classes. So other classes in the sense we are having the base class, that is one base class and one derived class. So, the base class members, the base class functions going to be accessed by the own, that is the derived class, and outside of the class, that is another class, means we are going to give some protection. That sort of protection comes under this private. So, private, we declare the variable, we declare the function, means outside class we cannot be accessed the members and functions allotted in the base class. This is what the private. And the next one, we come across to the public. So, next one is the public inheritance. As a name itself reveals, public. Public in the sense anyone can access the members, functions declared, defined under the base class. This is what the essence. So, if you are having one base class, multiple derived class, and the functions which are outside the class, all the thing can access the members and the functions under the base class. This is what the public inheritance. And the next one is that is the last one is the protected inheritance. So, protected inheritance. Protected inheritance in the sense, if we declare the functions and the variables under the protected access specifier, means the outside class members and the derived class members can access the protected members and variables under the base class. This is what the essence. So, by default, among the three, by default, what is the default access specifier in C++ is private. If you forget to write the access specifier in the program, or if you are knowingly leave that as an empty, means by default the private inheritance can be taken as an access specifiers. Then in essence, this is a tabular format of access specifier, whether it can be accessed from the own class, whether it can be accessed from the derived class, whether it can be accessed from the outside class. So, in the private, outside class is not applicable, derived class is not applicable, own class is applicable. Own class in the sense base class itself. And the public, all the, that is inside the class, outside the class, derived class, all the things are applicable for the inheritance. Then the last one is the protected. Protected can be accessible by its own class, by its derived class, but the outside class it's not applicable. This is what the in short of this access specifiers. Different forms of inheritance or different types of inheritance. What are the different types of inheritance means? There are 5 types. So, the first one we can name that as a single inheritance. Then the second one is multiple inheritance. Multi-level is the third one. Hierarchical or hierarchical is the fourth one. The last one is the hybrid inheritance. So, single inheritance. As a name itself, it tells or reveals that it is the single. Single in the sense one. One in the sense one base class, one derived class. So, the entire program consists of one base class and one derived class. So, this is the example. For example, lion and the cub. So, this is the best example. Lion is the base class and the cub is the derived class, because the cub going to derive some of the features from its father, that is a lion, and it has all it can also has its own or unique features in addition. This is what the base class and derived class of the single inheritance. Let's move on to the syntax. So, syntax, here we are going to use the colon operator for the differentiation of derived class and then the base class. So, the syntax is class and then derived class name colon and then the mode and at last base class name. So, class space derived class name colon and then mode space and then base class name. So, then the open braces or curly braces, then the objects, one object to multiple object, then the close the curly braces, put the semicolon. At the end of the class you want to put the semicolon. So class, derived class name you want to specify, and the mode you are going to specify the access specifier. If you forgot to specify, by default it can be taken as private. This is what the syntax. Then we are going to move about the example. So base class we are going to define here as class student, curly braces, public specifier, and then integer role, and then closing the curly braces, putting the semicolon. So until this the base class gets over, then the derived class portion gets starts. So class exam is the derived class name, then colon, and then public, and then student. So here the accessibility specifier or access specifier is public, and then student is the name of the base class, then curly brace, and then private access specifier, then integer marks, then public, then void info. Info is the function name. Under that again curly braces, we are going to give the output of the roll number and then the marks. Closing the curly braces, closing the end of the curly braces of the class, putting the semicolon. And then next one, void main. So here the main function starts. Whatever the last derived class or whose derived, we are going to taken for the object creation. So exam E, exam is the name of the derived class and E is the object, and then E dot role. So it means we are going to access the member variable of the base class. So as we define that as the public access specifier, outside the class, inside the class, and then derived class, anything may be accessible. So here role can be accessed, and then the marks can be accessed from the derived class. And at last we are going to call the functions in the derived class using the object. So the output is whatever the output we supply in the screen gets outputted to the user. This is what the simple example for single inheritance. So next one is the multiple inheritance. Multiple inheritance, as the name itself reveals that multiple. Multiple means we are going to have two base classes, one derived class. This is what the multiple inheritance. So the lion and then the lioness. So lion, lioness, and the cub. So this is what the multiple inheritance. So lion and lioness is the base classes, and then the derived class is the cub. So the syntax. So class and then derived class name, colon, mode. Here we are going to have the two base classes. So base class name 1, base class name 2. Here we want to specify two base classes. So two modes we are going to specify. We are going to differentiate or differ the first base class name and the second base class name with the help of the comma. Then the open curly braces, objects, that is member function, member variables, and then close curly braces, putting the semicolon. Then the example. So we are going to short, as we discussed earlier in the single inheritance, we are going to use the simple short form, that is class lion, and then class lioness, class cub. Through three base classes we are going to use. So one is base class 1 lion, and the second one is lioness, and the third one is the cub. So cub is the derived class which we are going to inherit the properties of the lion and then lioness. So class cub, public lion, public lioness. So this is a derived class. And then what is the last class we derived means cub. So for the cub only we are going to create the object, that is cub C. This is what the basic example. Next one is the multi-level inheritance. So multi-level inheritance, here also have multiple classes, but there are some levels. That is what we call this as multi-level. So levels in the sense one base class, one derived class, in between we have another class gets introduced. That class can be called that as an intermediate class. So base class, then intermediate class, and then the last one is the derived class. So the intermediate class derives the properties of base class, and the derived class derive the properties of the intermediate class. This is what the multi-level inheritance. So syntax: class base class name, and then again class intermediate class name, colon mode base class name, and then class derived class name, colon mode intermediate class name. This is what the syntax for multi-level inheritance. And then example. So class animal, animal is the base class, and then class lion is the next one, that is the intermediate class, animal, and then lion, and then the cub. So these are the multi-level inheritance. So lion is the intermediate class, cub is the derived class. So lion going to inherit the properties of animal, and cub going to inherit the properties of lion. So base class, intermediate class, and then the derived class. So this is what the example. The last derived class we derived is cub. So for the cub derived class we are going to create the object in the main function, that is cub C. Then hierarchical, the fourth types of inheritance is hierarchical or hierarchical inheritance. So this, the name itself it reveals that hierarchical, hierarchy, it's going to follow some hierarchy. Hierarchy in the sense one base class and two derived classes. So multiple derived classes and one base class, animals, and then lion, and then lioness. So from the animals, lion and lioness are the derived class. So this is what the hierarchical inheritance. And while we coming for the syntax, class base class name, and then class derived class 1, then mode, then base class, and then class derived class 2 colon mode, and then base class name. So this is what the simple syntaxes of hierarchical inheritance. And while we coming for example, class animal, animal is the base class, class lion, lion is the derived class 1, and class lioness is the derived class 2. So here we are using the access specifier as public, and then base class name is animal. Here also base class name is animal. So and the last derived class is lioness. So lioness we are going to create the object. In the meanwhile, we are going to create the object for derived class 1 also. Why it is? Because means we are going to access the main class, that is the base class functionalities. So base class functionalities we are going to inherit the properties. For that we are going to create the two objects for derived class 1 and derived class 2 as well. So here most of the students made the mistakes, because here we are going to create the two objects for derived class 1 and derived class 2 as well. So make a note of it and be clear. Then next one, the last types of inheritance is hybrid or multi-path inheritance. So hybrid inheritance, as the name itself it reveals that hybrid, we are going to collaborate two or more inheritance, maybe single multiple, multiple multi-level, multi-level single, hierarchical and multiple. Any combinations we can do within our program based on our problem requirement. This is what the hybrid inheritance. So here base class, two derived class, and last one also derived class. So base class, from the base class we are going to inherit the two derived classes, derived class 1 and derived class 2, and the last one is also derived classes. So here I am going to took the combination of hierarchical, that is base class, one base class, two derived class, and next one is the multiple, that is derived class 1 and derived class 2 going to act as the base class, and derived class 3 is the base class. So hierarchical and then multiple. This is what the combinations I took for this example. The next one is the syntax. So class base class name, class, derived class name, and then the mode, and then the base class name, and then the class derived class to mode base class name. So I already specified that one base class, two derived classes. So derived class 1, derived class 2 going to incorporate the base class, and then the last one class derived class name 3 mode, we are going to inherit from derived class 1 and derived class 2. So that is what we are going to specify. This is what the simple syntax for hybrid inheritance. And then the last is example. So example, I took the base class name as animal, and then the derived class 1 as a lion, derived class 2 as a lioness, and the last derived class 3 name as cub. So this is what the example. So last derived class is cub. So for the cub, we are going to create the object in the main function. Then the next one. So next one is the virtual base class. So virtual base class, what is meant by this virtual base class, or simple form VBC? What is meant by this VBC means, we discussed the previous, that is the previous inheritance types, that is hybrid inheritance. In the hybrid inheritance, what is the drawback means, two derived class going to access the base class, and derived class 3 also going to access the base class via derived class 1 or derived class 2. So three derived classes going to access the member functions and member variables in the base class. So if the three derived class going to get access the base class member functions and member variables, the compiler have a ambiguity. Which function I am going to execute first? This is what the ambiguity. So to overcome this, we are going to use the virtual base class, that is VBC. So we are going to use the keyword virtual in the access specifier mode, so that the base class function remains virtual for the derived class 1, virtual for derived class 2, virtual for derived class 3. So with the help of the keyword virtual, we are going to use, we are going to incorporate the properties without any ambiguity or without any difficulty. This is what the main purpose of using this virtual base class. So we are going to the main thing. So this is what I told, class animal, class lion, whatever the example we discussed in the hybrid inheritance. So class lioness, class cub. So here the ambiguity occurs while the derived class lion, derived class lioness get access the base class. So to overcome this ambiguity, I am going to introduce, or we are going to use the keyword virtual. So next is the modified version of this hybrid inheritance example. So now you are going to see the virtual keyword placed after the mode in the derived class 1. So class lion colon public virtual and then animal. This virtual keyword can be placed before the mode, that is access specifier, or after the access specifier. So the first derived class I specified the virtual keyword after the mode, and for the next derived class 2 I specified the virtual keyword before the mode. So this is what the virtual function usage. Now if the lioness or lion derived class going to use the properties of base class, there is no ambiguity or no difficulty come across. So this is what the main purpose of virtual base class or VBC. The next one, today we discussed about the inheritance, the purpose, and then the types of inheritance. This is what we discussed. So inheritance, main purpose of using the inheritance is we are going to reuse the code and reuse the properties whatever we are using in the base class. This is what the reusability concept. And while we coming for the mode, there are three types of mode available. One is private, public, and the last one is the protected. And while we coming for the types, there are 5 types available under inheritance: single, multiple, multi-level, hierarchical, and then the last one is the hybrid inheritance. And then the last topic what we discussed is virtual base class. So virtual base class is going to overcome going to eradicate the disadvantages or demerits of hybrid inheritance. So this is what we discussed. Hope you understand well. Thank you.